Well, welcome to the Yoga Philosophy Discussion Group. Everybody coming to you from the Yoga Center of Chico. My name is Lauren Carley, and with me is Tom Hess, co-owner of the Yoga Center of Chico. In this Yoga Philosophy Discussion Group, we read through various books, and at this point in time, we are reading Light on Life by B.K.S. Iyengar, and we are in chapter 6. Yeah,
Right.
that's the only problem with, there we go. Okay, that was blurring. Anyway, there he is, the man himself, Tom and Mr. Iyengar. That's what the book looks like.
Without
We're
the
in chip. Yeah, we're in chapter 6, part 2. And what we do in this series is the fourth Thursday of every month, we meet live at the Yoga Center of Chico and go through the particular part of the chapter that's indicated in the schedule. And then we put the summary recording, not of the live session, but this recording right here that we're doing on YouTube. So it's accessible. So you don't have to be in the room. But we also, to make it as most accessible as possible, open up a Zoom link for the live in room. And that's whole session is not recorded, but you can certainly join by the Zoom link. To get the link, it's the same every time. Go to the Yoga Center of Chico's website, click on events, and you will see right at the top is a flyer for this yoga philosophy discussion group. And it'll have a big button that says click here for the link, and that will take you straight into Zoom. Really works really well. I tested it again the other night. Also, speaking of the schedule, if you'd like to get on the mailing list, the access to the mailing list is through emailing me and Tom. And just say you want to be in the mailing list. All these sessions are free. We do this because we feel that it's important for yoga practitioners to understand this material a little bit better in order to incorporate it into their practice. Speaking of which, if you do join the mailing list, not only do you get the standing schedule, but you also get a list of terms that we use, and you get some proposed exercises to answer the question of how can I make these documents, these books, not Light on Life, the sutras, the Gita, how can I bring them alive to my own life in here and now? So the suggested exercises, do them, don't do them, doesn't matter to us, are also available if you join the email list. So with that, I will summarize what I see as the important parts of the second half of chapter 6. Chapter 6, subtitle, well, the title of chapter 6 is Bliss. The subtitle, you might say, is the Ananda Maya Kosha. What Iyengar is doing in his book is, in everyday modern language, using himself as an example of his struggle, is taking us through the various koshas from the outside of our world, our body, turning inward. And it's a journey that we are on. We are now finally into the innermost kosha, and we're into the second half of the chapter that talks about the Anandamaya kosha. So this is not easy to talk about, and it's not easy to conceptualize. It's each chapter has a lot of material in it, and what Tom and I each do separately is we go through and pick and choose what we think are phrases and sections to highlight that we want to bring forth. So we don't sit there and read the whole book out loud. What we do is we pick the various phases that stand out and summarize. And that's what we discuss in the room live. And that's what we're discussing here online. Okay, so let's get going. The second half of chapter 6. This is, of course, assuming you read the first half, but I'm not here to recap the first half. That was a separate video and these all get posted on the Yoga Center of Chico's YouTube channel. So Mr. Iyengar starts on page 207 in the second half, and he says, to a yogi, nature is a mountain to be climbed. When he says nature, or when and there's any reference to nature in yoga, it's almost always talking about Prakriti. that aspect of nature, the yogic view of nature. We're going to get that into that fairly deep here. To a yogi, nature is a mountain to be climbed. Yoga is a dualistic philosophy, nature on one hand and soul or Purusha on the other. This is how he's approaching this material in the second half of chapter 6, because we're going to be talking about samadhi, and samadhi is a state that is indescribable. How do you describe something that's indescribable? What Mr. Iyengar does in this chapter is he takes us back to square one uh, of the eight limbs of yoga, of your yoga practice, of your work through the koshas, and we land here. We're climbing the mountain. That's the journey of nature. Meaning, we're trying to understand nature not only through our yogic smarts, our yogic intellect, the buddhi mind, but also through our consciousness. And he says, yoga sees the origin of nature as a root. The qualities of nature, the three gunas, mass or inertia, one of them, tamas in Sanskrit, the energetic, rajas, and the serenity or luminosity is the third guna. That all of nature, the entire cosmos, all of Prakriti is made up of these three gunas. They're in proportion to each other. And one of the tools that yoga gives us to not only understand our own body in the world by being conscious of how those three gunas work in our body. You may be, I'm sitting here pretty much in a tamasic state. I can feel the weight of my body, but my brain is very ragistic right now because it's on fire. And they're probably out of balance with my sattvic state and so on. Everybody can use these tools, these concepts to take a look at their own self. But one of the things that Iyengar is talking about here is going to the root of the three gunas. Now, it turns out that the three gunas, for the most part, I'll say, depending on what your background is, correspond with what the scientific method has also looked at with the relationship between energy, mass, and light. And of course, that's E equals mc squared. And Mr. Iyengar puts this in his book. He says that this equation is a way of looking at the relationships between the two. So we have the three gunas as actual forces at work, not only in our body and in our world, but in the cosmos. In the root, he says, in the root of nature, they are stable. When they become stable, they have the potential for expressing their nature. Amas, mass and inertia, rajas, energy, and so on. But in our everyday world, they're dynamically proportioned to each other. Okay, let's just hold that thought for a minute. And then he gets into page 209 down to page 210. He talks a little bit about what in yoga world is a concept of the evolution of the cosmos. And why does he put this in here? Why is he getting so esoteric? Because if you were to make progress in your spiritual journey, you might want to meditate on the three gunas and their root. Because if you are headed, and this is fast forward a little bit, but if you're headed towards a meditation or an idea that you're bringing your prakriti and your purusha together to merge, you might want to do it in terms of your own body and your own soul, your own atman, but it helps to have a concept of what we're dealing with here. And this is where he's taking the three gunas to their state where they're equally proportional. In our body, they're constantly dynamic. And just know that if one is up, the other is down. They're equally proportional within a certain range that's not really defined, but they're always, if one is up, there's an inverse relationship, the other's down. What we try to do is have all three of them equal. So in in a meditation that you might make, this will be an exercise, is take a look at, he says, the beginning, if there is a beginning, there isn't a beginning, is cosmic intelligence, the Mahat, that then the evolved to or spit out or spun off or devolved, however you want to say it, into cosmic energy, prana. And you have to have the intelligence first in order to produce prana. And prana in yoga world and in physics is all forms of energy, nuclear, chemical, light, heat, you name it. And then out of the energy, which would be the E in E equals MC squared, comes consciousness, chitta, the cosmic. We're talking at the cosmic level, but we also see it in ourselves. And out of that comes the ego, the ahamkara, or duality. When the world goes from all of the three gunas in the whole cosmos being equal, if they're all equal and they're all equal the same, it looks like everything is just like a white wall. But as soon as you have a differentiation, you have duality. And he talks a little bit about, he likes to use the analogy of you have like a point. Then once that point moves and it starts going through a sine wave, now you have duality. And once it goes up and down, or you have some kind of differentiation through time, it's just some imagery that happens to come out of physics that you can use or not. If it's unfamiliar territory, you just don't like it, you can use something else. But this is what he uses. And then he comes down through the invisible manifestation, and finally, us here today, the visible manifestation. So he presents this in this second half of the chapter as a path to follow in your thinking or your meditation to look at the full scope of Prakriti, including going back to the root. He gives us a path to try to go back to the root. Now he shifts gears and he talks about yoga as involution. Well, isn't that the path we've been on in this whole book through the koshas? Turning inward, turning inward, turning inward. But the name of this section on page 211 is Yoga as Involution. And he says on 211, if evolution is a preparation for yoga, the intention to unite with the soul, then involution is actual yoga, union itself. Let me read that again. If evolution, the evolution of the cosmos down to us, sitting right here, is a preparation for yoga, i.e., the intention to unite with the soul, then involution is the actual yoga, I'll say practice, of heading towards union itself. Now remember, he started off by saying yoga is a dualistic philosophy. We struggle from the gross material world into the subtle heart of nature. The force that is expressing itself welcomes our journey. We also use our will, and you'll find more on the will in the chapter on manas, and invoke divine aid as an act of surrender and humility. So we're still on a journey. We're just really deep in the journey. And then he gives some examples of people who've turned their life around by changing their thinking, by looking for the light. He says, if you want to know, if you're wandering in the wilderness and you want to know where to head, look for the light. Okay, let's see here. Okay, page 212. I really like this. Yoga says the knowledge and effort are all within you. The knowledge and effort are all within you. It is as simple and as difficult as learning to discipline our own minds and hearts and body and breath. Now, that's true, but it really helps to be able to read these books, which is why we have this discussion group. It helps to go to some of the source documents or commentary on the source documents. Source documents, I'm talking about the Vedas, Upanishads, the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the Gita, and so on. And then page 212. Prana, the first form to evolve from cosmic intelligence, which is just what I summarized a little bit earlier. Prana, the first form to evolve from cosmic intelligence. This is a model. It comes out of the yoga world. It is the breath of life in all manifestations of the universe, whether they physically breathe or not. The breath of life of all manifestations in the universe. It's that energy in E equals MC squared. Energy can convert itself into mass and back and forth. If you're sitting around a campfire, take a stick of wood, feel the weight in your hand, toss it into the fire or start a fire with it, and see the conversion from the stick of wood to the energy in light and heat. It's all around us. We just have to be able to see it. And what he's getting at here is prana is the vehicle of cosmic intelligence. So we've probably heard this term over and over many times in this discussion group. Prana is the vehicle of intelligence. And it's hard to understand. It may be hard to understand in real life, but when you take it to this level, it makes more sense. And then you can bring it from the cosmic level back down into your life and see if it rings true for you. This is all about verifying this stuff for yourself and finding the truth within. And then he gets in talking about samadhi. So there's different levels of samadhi depending on what document you read. So if you're reading the sutras, I think it goes through, I don't know, Tom's going to correct me, I'll probably get this wrong, but 4 or 5 levels of samadhi. There's all these little distinctions. And what Iyengar, okay, thank you, Tom. 7, I forgot. What Iyengar does is he'll just talk about 2 categories of samadhi. And he uses the traditional term bija, which is a seed. And, in the seed, use a little germ of life. So the type of samadhi you might get into is where you're starting to still your mind, and you're using your consciousness to see your inner self. And we're in the deepest kosha. So your consciousness, the practice is your conscious is looking at your internal soul. It's your soul seeing itself, as Iyengar says. So when you get there, usually the first stage is a samadhi, but it has it's a I think it's a yeah with seed, abija. And why is he saying that? He's saying that because it's a warning. You might be able to get into this very still state where your consciousness is looking at itself, the soul is looking at itself, and and it gets to that state that we've talked about many times where the seer and the act of seeing and the object of seeing all merges. But in this case, the object is the soul. But if you still have seeds of your ego involved, they're going to sprout and bloom. And guess what? Your ego is going to go back to, ta-da, I'm back in full force. And you gotta keep working. And then without seed, of course, is you finally have surpassed the ego. The ego's left behind, and it does not raise up again. So that's just so you know where the ultimate goal is. But you have to figure out where you are in the here and now, and every day put one foot in front of the other in this practice and move forward. But it helps to understand the concepts. So in his discussion of samadhi, samadhi has to come on its own. You can't force it. You do the work, and you may end up there or not. You do the work. It is a state outside of time. So then he goes into this section talking about samadhi. We don't know if he's talking about his own experience, but some of us, including myself, suspect that he is. But this is well documented over thousands of years. There's been lots of evidence of people who have reached this state for a second or a minute or a day or whatever. Doesn't matter. You're either in it or you're out of it. He says samadhi is an experience where the existence of the I, the ego, disappears. Ex- Explanation can come only through the presence of the ego. I like that chapter. I like that sentence because I highlighted it. Try and imagine being even in existence for a second or two without your ego. This is this is what it's all about. You, it's very difficult to do. So samadhi cannot be explained. Let me read that again. Samadhi is an experience where the existence of the I disappears. Explanation can only come through the presence of the ego, and so samadhi can't be explained. Works. What is he trying to do here? Explain something that can't be explained. So we have to. It's like a black hole. We have to explain what goes on around it, the approach to it, but we can't explain the specific incidents. He says, we are now in the innermost sheath or casual body where we can see that we are divine and the self with a small s is replaced by the big S self as we truly understand at the core of our being that our individual soul is a part of the universal soul. So yoga philosophy might be a dualistic philosophy, but the effort is to now, this is tricky business, but whether you're talking about merging Purusha and Prakriti, or you're just talking about bringing them together, quite often it's described as a divine marriage, where they're still two, but they come together as two. So what does that mean? That's for you to figure out. That's going to be one of the exercises. Okay, page 215, 216. Let me skip ahead. We are concerned here with evolution and progressive growth and change. We're concerned here with evolution and progressive growth and change. And it is this growth and change that this ever greater ability to see the truth that will allow us to live increasingly in freedom. This is, and I'm saying this, what he's saying here, this is not an all or nothing. That's a trap that a lot of people fall into. Oh, I've never reached samadhi. I never will. I give up. Well, I'm sorry that that might happen to some people. But what Iyengar is saying here, and what the reason I wanted to emphasize it, it's a slow, progressive effort. And the more you progress, the more freedom you feel in your life. Now, Tom and I were just having a little conversation the other night and sharing some things. And one of the things we both realized was that the more we progress in our practice, the more everything around us, awful lot of it is like you just have to shake your head and kind of laugh because that's all you can do. More and more and more things in your life become kind of not irrelevant, but the importance diminishes quite a bit, and you end up laughing a lot. It just almost nothing because it's all not that it's ridiculous, but it's all just kind of funny. And then Iyengar says, by renunciation, I mean freedom from the egoic self. If this isn't yoga, I don't know what is. It's the progress toward freeing yourself from the egoic self, the ahamkara. When one stops thinking of the effect is a deep inward experience. When one stops thinking of the effect that we have on the world, the fruit they call it in yoga terms, it's a deep inward experience. This very journey from the periphery to the core is detachment. There is a detachment from the effect and an attachment to the soul. So I've had quite a few people say to me, well, I can't go there. I'm afraid to let go. I'm afraid to let go because they think there's a void. Right here, page 217. No, there's not a void. I had a long conversation with somebody one time about all they saw was a void. Now they happen to be on a certain drug, but what the drug showed them was a void. And they asked me, what do you think? Well, right here's the answer. You head towards the soul. You get a better understanding and a better view from your consciousness of your soul. Renunciation, you renounce to the soul. So for all of you that are afraid to let go, you're afraid you're going to lose control. um, the answer, you might say, is yeah, you can renounce and give up control in a sense. And it's not so much a forced action towards the soul, but my experience is it feels more like you're melting in that direction or you're relaxing in that direction. You want to go in that direction. So there's no longer a fear of letting go and giving up in the path of renunciation. Am I there yet? No, of course, I got all kinds of problems in my life, but I have not been afraid to follow that path, and that's my urging to people that are still feel that fear, and it's a visceral fear. Okay, moving right along. He says but samadhi has its problems. There's always two sides of the coin. You can't conceive of it, as it's unknown and yet to aspire to it without greed. If you experience it, you cannot explain it. We already talked about that's the second problem with it. Third problem: I'm sorry. Third problem with samadhi. There are different degrees of samadhi, which I talked about in the beginning. Sabija samadhi, the ego is not burned out entirely and it's going to come back. And nirbija, where the bliss of non-being transformed into the light of being. So just good to know. File that information away. If you end up getting there, then you will understand what's going on. And then on page 220, he talks about 7 inner transformations of consciousness. So if yoga isn't about anything, it's about where's your consciousness right now? What is it doing? And I'm not going to read through all the 7 in the interest of time, but flip to page 220 and read them. And you might meditate on them. You might mull them over and think about them and see if you see them in your life. Okay, then he talks a little bit about Kundalini and chakras. I'm not going to go into detail on those here, but he addresses them for people that need them to be addressed. And what it comes down to is transformation. I want to highlight this sentence that he said, page 224. Transformation is sustained change, and it is achieved through practice. There's a phrase I really like called, it goes like this: motivation gets you going, practice keeps you going, and practice becomes who you are. And that's essentially another way to say what Iyengar is saying here, is that you eventually achieve some transformation in your life. And that might be something you want to reflect back on and think about areas of your life that you have transformed, that you have changed. And then he finishes up by saying that samadhi is only a state whereby you experience the absorption of the body, mind, and soul as a single unit. But from samadhi, we have to reach higher and subtler states called kaivalya, external emancipation or freedom in action. Kaivalya is samadhi in action, and the name of the next chapter. That's the jumping off point for chapter 7 is kaivalya. I might just say that it's also the name of the 4th pada in the Yoga Sutras. If you want to jump over there and just read another attempt to describe kaivalya. And with that, I will turn it over to Tom to fill in the blanks, correct any errors, give his own view. And I might say that I think I said in the beginning, but there's so much material in these chapters that we pick and choose what we want to highlight to try to summarize. And we don't always take the same approach. It's the same material, but we don't always take the same approach. We like to present both views, especially if there's differences. That's where the interesting discussions come up. So, Tom?
Okay, thanks, Lauren. First of all, I thought it was a very good presentation. And what I like about what you bring to the discussion is your scientific background. You're able to talk about the E equals MC squared and physics and all of that, and connect modern day physics with this old spiritual tradition. So I really like that part of it. Um, the only other thing I would add is the importance of balancing the three gunas. You talked a lot about it, but that is the key there to get those your inner state into balance on many levels, the guna level, the chakra level, all kinds of levels. But I really can't add too much more to your presentation this morning. It was great. So thank you.
All right, then we'll wrap up this video and get it posted. And stay tuned. Next, this is not the end. Just because it's called Samadhi, it's not the end. Now we're going to talk about how you take this absorption into the real world and the action of the real world.
Okay, great. Thanks.